I'm Jim Check.
I'm Renee Merrifield.
We're here with Beyond the Ballot, and Renee and I were here all last night into the wee hours, and we didn't get the final result. We still don't have a final result. We know that it's a Liberal minority for sure, but it could turn into a majority. They're pretty close right now. But the riding you and I talked about right from the beginning of the evening, the fear slash gray riding, still up in the air. There's one box to be counted, and that box has a lot more votes than most of the boxes. It has close to 5,000 ballots in that box.
Wow, that could be a game changer. Last I checked, it was as narrow as 60 votes separating the two. I think it's about 170 right now. So definitely could be quite a game changer at that 11th hour. And you're right about not knowing whether or not it's a minority or majority government. There are still 12 outstanding, I believe it is. We've got Terrebonne in Quebec right now. The Bloc is leading the Liberals by 28, but you said that this one might have been called already.
Yeah, I
I
think they
think
just flipped one. Yeah, so the bloc ended up with 22 elected now, and the Liberals end up now with
160.
169, and then the bloc at 22, and the NDP is still has three that are kind of. Oh, they have two in contention. They just closed one off, so they have 5 and 2. They have two in contention right now, and the
Okay.
Conservatives only have one in contention. So it gets tougher and tougher right now for the Liberals to get any more, right? So they could potentially lose this fear riding because they're leading in that riding right now. So
Yeah.
there's only one in contention for the Conservatives. So unless yeah, so right now they would have to take all three of those seats for the Liberals to get a majority. So that looks not doable. So just like right there, right at the line, eh? Like right there. But if you look at the popular vote again, the Conservatives at 8 million votes, and the Liberals at 8.4 million. But let's talk about that box a little bit. That box of 5,000 almost 5,000 votes, and that is incarcerated, which would probably lean Liberal, you would think,
Yes.
because they don't like the three strikes you're out. And then it's the military, and
Yeah.
also the out of country. So yeah, so that's but the out of country ones that might lean Liberal too, because that's a lot of probably baby boomers and stuff that are. I,
It is, but it could also be a lot of snowbirds that
yeah.
are business oriented investors, et cetera, that actually want to bring their money back to Canada.
Mm.
I'm thinking of some of those that I know that voted in the advanced polls because they were going to either be out of country or live part time outside of the country, and in those particular cases, that would be for conservative votes. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens and to see how that factors into the upcoming and how that makes this decision decide. Elections Canada did say that they thought they would have preliminary results back today for all of the ridings that are still in contention. So let's hope that we have a definitive answer in the meantime.
So bittersweet for everybody, I think, and in a little ways, because bittersweet for the Liberals if they got like that close and they couldn't get it over the line, right? Just I mean like this just at a razor's edge, and obviously bittersweet for uh, the Conservatives that they'd get more votes than they've had in a long time. They did get more seats. They won, I think, 20 some odd more seats, but Pierre losing his seat and not forming government is obviously a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. I mean, Ottawa insiders talked a lot about Carleton and how much money the Liberals dumped into Carleton to really see Fanjoy win. There Brian Lilly was posting on X about some potential voter voter obstruction, et cetera. I don't know if that's actually true or not, or if someone's just, it's completely anecdotal. And I don't want to speculate that way. What we did talk about were the 90 names on a ballot box and whether or not that led to some voter suppression,
Yeah.
and just whether people are like, I'm not going to go and actually read that entire thing. And suffice to say, I do think that Pierre was definitely targeted, and yeah, if you want reform, probably not the best one to target.
Yeah, no, that one is it shows like no game is too or no bar is too low. No bar
Yeah,
is too low. A lot of games throughout. I mean, we saw videos of liberal campaign people walking and taking conservative stuff off the door and replacing it and stuff. A lot of little games, and then there's Button Gate. There's a whole bunch of things that this not a clean win for sure. If you were looking at it that way, not a clean win.
No,
And
and
then
ever
the
since
and then that shot right at the end too. Pierre did a nice acceptance or like concession speech. Thanking Mark Carney and congratulating him. But Mark Carney talking about being humble, then takes a shot at Pierre.
yeah, Mark Carney and humility doesn't really. It's not; those aren't terms that I would ring synonymously. So definitely was a little bit. Yeah, his acceptance speech could have been actually. I would say humbler.
Not
And
not very Canadian for sure.
no, most
Not
definitely.
very not very Canadian. At that point, like if we think about a hockey game, if you win the game, you don't go and rub your glove in the other guy's face. You go and shake hands and tell him good game, right? That's the
Absolutely.
Canadian way to do it. You don't go and stuff them at that
No.
point. Because that's, like when we've seen that happen in hockey. We think about hockey when they go and they drill the puck into the empty net or something, and that usually causes a lot of
Yeah. And
issues.
if anything, that's more Trump-esque, right? To
Very
really
much so.
grind the win. But speaking of Trump, and I do want to get Sam Cooper, who we've talked about several times, as really sounding the alarm bell on foreign interference in our elections. I think this morning posted on X just how. Trump had interfered in our election, and had he, how he had become, basically the sole sole center focus of our election. I really think we need to think through that. And, I know that in talking with my family members and close friends, et cetera, they're all paying way more attention to Trump than they are actually paying attention to our own election and our own election platforms. Everyone was glued to the TV to figuring out where tariffs were going to come and what they were going to look like, rather than actually looking and saying, okay, well, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to actually govern ourselves, and this is why our economy is in the state that it is. And I do think a few articles that were being written this morning about how Polyev didn't lose to Carney, he lost to Trump. And I do think that is true. I think that Trump had a huge shadow over this election, and I think that the history books will be written about that one.
Let me ask you this question. If it was reversed right now and the conservatives won and Trump meddled, how much attention would CBC and CTV and Global be paying attention? Like screaming from the rooftops. I hear nothing. I hear nothing about interference. Do you hear anything?
No, and
Just
I
think it
think
was the other way around right now, and Polyev won, and Trump meddled in the election.
Yeah, I think we need to really eyes wide open on that. Eyes wide open on the media interference that we've experienced over the course of this election. They have not been unbiased. They have not been sharing equally. Their commentators have been very
Yeah.
very biased, and it's been difficult. It's been difficult to get the truth. It's been difficult to have an unfettered opinion. And yeah, I mean, Carney basically acknowledging all of the institutions that he the Canadian institutions, and then only mentions CBC like last night in his speech. I was like, come on, dude, like that's just disgusting, and thanking those that got me here, sort of a
So
thing.
yeah, I would say the one two for election interference. Trump obviously like huge, right? Media number two, mainstream media, the legacy media number two. In that they should be upset and angry and just like at Donald Trump for interfering in an election. They're not, because the result is what they're happier with.
Yeah, and we all should be upset. We all should be, on election day, no less. Trump tweeting about becoming the 51st state, knowing that props Carney's voter base and Carney's numbers up.
Yeah.
It I was looking at the Abacus poll, and I know I talked about this yesterday, but looking at the Abacus poll and looking at the different demographics and what they really cared about. And, the younger demographic, it's all about the cost of living and affordability of housing. And then you look at the boomers, and the boomers have this like number that goes off the charts about Trump. And then, second is like healthcare, but it's like maybe, half of the same chart. And yet, care about Trump is like, next to nil for the younger voter. So I am very anxious to see how many of those younger voters came out, and whether or not they were able to vote in the ways that they were thought to have. But suffice to say, right now, there is almost a little bit of a silver lining here for me, and I'll tell you where it is, and that is Carney has to wear the state of the economy. He has to wear where it is right now. He has to wear it for the next, let's call it 18 months. I can't see the NDP nor the Bloc forming a coalition. I think we're going to be going vote by vote by vote. Very precarious government, very precarious, situation right now for all involved. It's going to be a very weak government, and largely we're going to see that Carney really doesn't have the strength, or does he have the strength to actually push against his own caucus and see things turn. You look at his lieutenants in his cabinet, and basically you're looking at all the same actors, all the same ministers that were there before. So how this is actually going to go down is going to be quite interesting, and whether or not he can turn and become someone different, or whether or not it's going to actually reinforce what Canadians maybe suspect, and if the momentum that we saw in the last week continues, or if we see a fall off the cliff of support. My suspicion is that as Carney has more to wear in terms of his decisions and in terms of the state of the economy, etc., I think he's going to find it a very difficult 18 months. And I think that the reality is that the Canadians could be back at the polls in that amount of time.
Yeah, on the media one, and I'll be my last comment on the media. If the media doesn't become the voice of the population as a whole, then and it just wants to be the voice of the government, because that was warned by Peter Menzies, the former CRTC VP, Holly Doan, the Blacklock, saying right now if the Liberals win, there is a danger that there is only one media left in Canada, and it is a federal arm of the federal government, and it's starting to look like that. I watched Rosemary Barton gloat really on Poilievre's loss, and then say to Jason Kenney that she's heard that they want to get rid of Pierre Poilievre, and Jason Kenney said, "I've never heard any of that. I know lots of conservatives." And she says, "Well, I have my own sources." Well, she's had her own sources there when the truckers were there and there was Russian money, which turned out not to be true. She had her own sources on residential schools, which turned out to be, she has, and she's the face of the CBC. Is that what the CBC wants to put out to Canada? Somebody that continues to provide misinformation and disinformation to the public?
Yeah, it's scary is what it is. We have to get to the point where we actually are calling a government to account, and our journalists are doing so. I'm watching. There's some really great investigative journalists who are out there, and really holding feet to the fire, and that would be people like Sam Cooper. I mean, he literally was almost single-handedly contributed to the demise of the BC Liberals, now BC United party. It was his expose and willful blindness, and led to the Cullen Commission, led to the whole EB's mantra about money laundering, and how the BC Liberals at the time were all complicit. All of that, yes, there was truth to it, but it was not as damning as what was stated in the book. But having said that, he was really uncovering a lot of the errors, and those were confirmed by Cullen, and Cullen came forward with his recommendations. We are not seeing that right now. Sam Cooper's cries of foreign interference were largely met by the mainstream media as having no substance, and really discarded. I think we need to get more serious. But I can't tell you, the other silver lining for me in this whole thing is that in 120 days, Carney is actually going to have to declare his conflicts of interest and declare all of his personal holdings, and I think that that's going to be really eye opening for a lot of Canadians.
And I would ask Canadians to watch for how media portrays it. They might do a story on it and just kind of let it die on its own. Whereas, and that's what we have to watch how, and if we want to have a paid public service broadcaster, then they have to act in the service of the public, not of the political party that pays them.
Yeah, and I think that the expose on Cambridge Analytica and how much algorithms were influencing and how they had used the algorithms to influence the election, I think was really awe-inspiring and very alarming when that all came to light after the Trump Clinton election. I think that we need almost one more of those, which is, if we had completely neutral individuals watching mainstream media, what would be their assumption of what's being pumped into our into our TVs and into our feeds. I think that we'd be really surprised by that. And what I would, I hate to say it, but X is one of the last sources that we have where you can actually get the different medias. And when I say different medias, I'm not saying that they're all true. I'm not saying that they're all right, but at least it gives us exposure to things that we can use to question what we're being told and how we're being told it.
And it is a target of the Liberals. They've mentioned it several times. The fear riding, we'll just go back to that for a couple seconds because that could be the all-important riding. And again, 5,000 votes, that's a lot of votes. So it's key. And it's interesting in that in the BC provincial election, the Christia Lowen and Loyal Wooldridge, I think it was 30 votes at the end of the day when that
30.
was recounted though. So yeah, so
That riding is incredibly tight. It really is. It's very divided. It's very split. You have the Dilworths and the Glenmores, and you have downtown, and it's a riding that has a lot of different individuals and a lot of different people, and all the way up into Rutland and Joe Rich and Big White. So very different interests represented by those ridings, and so it'll be interesting to see who came out in the special election, the mail-in ballots, and how that influences. Last night we said and we talked about how BC was going to decide this election. It's as true this morning or this afternoon as it was last night. We could literally have Kelowna's riding deciding whether or not Carney gets a minority or majority government. So, this is a very interesting race. It's coming down to the wire. We have about three ridings in BC that are yet to be called or yet to be decided. And, if any of those flip or change, it could really have a tremendous effect on the course of what happens, as we move forward.
yeah, and the big one too is in BC. I think the Conservatives took 20 of 43 ridings or something like that. So just think if they would have taken more in BC, because that would have shifted the balance of power. So BC actually had a say for sure in this election. BC definitely carried the balance of power because the rest of Canada is kind of fairly even because the Conservatives did pretty good in Ontario actually and did good in Newfoundland.
Yeah. And, for once, I felt like this was a true election of Canada. There wasn't one particular area that held the balance of power. There wasn't one particular, even when we talk about, the metropolitan areas of Toronto, yes, there's the 905, but then there's also the other areas right around it. So you've got this red and blue mix. You've got, the downtown Vancouver core of red and some orange for NDP, but then you've also got blue surrounding it again. So it's a very interesting race, one that wasn't decided until really the last ballots were counted, whether that was in some of the ridings that we were watching last night, or whether that was in some of the other ones that we've learned. Just the enormity of those final ballots to be counted.
David Eby asked if he wants Jagmeet Singh's job, and he says
Who
no.
who wants to jump onto a sinking ship? I mean, that is very detrimental. I think there's going to be a huge provincial question about what happens to the NDP in both Manitoba and and in BC. I think that their power might be somewhat muted, and definitely doesn't have any sort of support from the national level. The answer for Horgan and Eby as he started was to really align with Trudeau. I see no difference in Carney. In fact, Eby will find probably a good source in Carney. But it's going to be difficult because Carney really has about 18 months to make his mark. And in that 18 months, if he veers too far to the left, I think that you're going to find that the Conservatives will have more space in the center to take up. And if that happens, I don't think we'll have the same election that we had last night or yesterday over the course of this last 36 days. But I do think that, if he tries to distance himself at all from that, it'll open up space for the NDP to resurrect itself.
It's looking like the chances for a Liberal majority are slipping away. There's only 2 seats left that they could take that aren't elected right now. So one from the Conservatives, one for the NDP. And even if they took both of those, it wouldn't be enough. So I imagine Jagmeet Singh is kicking himself right now as well, because he could have been the guy again. 4 more years of Jagmeet Singh with irrational whatever.
I think, I mean, if we think about a coalition, and I know we talked a lot about this, is there a potential for a coalition? The reality is the Bloc is very difficult to coalesce with. They just have a very unilateral and very myopic focus on Quebec, and it's very difficult to try and push that across to the rest of Canada. So I don't really see them forming any sort of coalition with the Bloc. I don't see them forming a coalition with the NDP. I think the NDP has kind of come to its senses and is now seeing that, oh wait, that was why we were in the state that we were, and do we want to lose more seats yet? So I really don't see that happening. I think that if we do see that happening, we've got Jenny Kwan, who really wants to go more on the decriminalization and more on the safe supply side, which I think is going to be very detrimental for the Liberals. And I do think that we're going to see a vote to vote sort of government. And I mean, as you and I and Ian talked last night, that is a really difficult state for Canadians against Trump. It's going to be very difficult for us to negotiate any sort of the trade agreements that we need. It's going to be very difficult for us to actually, see our way through the tariff issues and to see our way to new trade partners. So it's going to be a very interesting next few months as Carney gets his legs under his feet. I wish that he would have said, yes, and I will bring back Parliament too, because there's so much to do. We have literally had no Parliament sitting for a very long time. And the reality is that that does not bode well for Canadians. So it'd be great to see them get back to work and to see a summer session of sorts so that we could actually have some government work done.
There is one more option for the Liberals. They could actually try to convince the 7 NDP MPs to dissolve the party and cross over too. There is that, that I'm sure that point of discussion is probably being had right now as well, because it's their party basically collapsed in on itself.
Yeah, they could. I mean, typically in the Parliament, we may see one, possibly two that cross the floor on any given 4-year term. To see 7 would be really surprising, but has it been done before? For sure, it has. Not necessarily federally, but certainly provincially, we've seen that happen. Where with the Wild Rose Party, for instance, we saw crossing the floor and then basically. It was a very.
I guess they'd only have to convince 3 of them.
Yeah, it would only have to convince 3. You are correct. You are correct. I just wanted to correct something that we said last night, and that was that this is not reminiscent back of the Martin Harper days, even after we were talking about it, I was like, that's not right, because Harper actually won against Martin, and then it led to a pretty big implosion of the federal Liberals. They had Michael Ignatieff
Mm.
and Martin, and they really didn't. And one more in there, Stephen, Stefan. I'm
I'm
forgetting his
drawing.
name.
I'm drawing a blank
I
as
can't
well.
remember who he was as the leader of the Liberals. But at any rate, they had three different leaders, and they really were struggling in that time, and that was really what allowed Harper to really make some headway, and even get us a very small majority, but a majority all the same. So it was the beginning of a switch, and so I don't think that this is really harkening back to that 2005 2006 era.
There you go. Kent's wandering in here. I don't know if he's got something
Oh,
to say or
Well, we just heard that the 200 that the last
box.
vote came in.
Yeah.
235 margin of victory now for Fear as of that last poll. So there still could be a recount.
Oh, okay. So Kent's saying that the fewer the last ballot box has been counted, and there's a 235 margin of victory for Stephen Fear, but there could be a recount. So, but that last box has been counted.
wow, that's incredible. And it's hard. I can't imagine, being either one of those candidates right now. It's it will go to a recount, I'm sure, because with 50 some thousand ballots being
Yeah.
cast, to only have 250,000 separating, that is a huge or very, very small difference. So I could definitely see those being recounted. Typically, though, are we really going to see that flip? That would be tricky to, I don't imagine that it will. And it looks like that's going to be a Liberal riding for the foreseen future.
And then the only other thing I think we can talk about right now, the National Post put out a piece talking about Alberta. Danielle Smith put out a statement. She wants a meeting. She wants to know what the path forward is for Alberta, because they will do what's in the interest of Alberta. The National Post putting on a piece that we will likely have a unity crisis. And, Blanchet has been, I think, actually trying to stoke that as well, because maybe he can run under the cover of that and have his own unity crisis. Because I don't think he has enough power to do it himself, but if he sees, or people see Alberta, Saskatchewan in a unity crisis, that might stoke some stuff for the Quebecois as well.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I mean, Danielle Smith, I loved her statement. I think the most, pivotal part of that was her saying, we cannot go with status quo. I think that's what I felt this morning, even on my hike, was just, oh my goodness, is it just more of this, of the 4 years, more of the same for the 4 years, or 3 years or 2 years or however long it ends up being. I really don't think that, yeah, I don't think that would bode well for Carney if it is just more of the same. I think that people are generally, what was it, 7% of Canadians think we're on the wrong track. He
Mm-hmm.
has to change tracks and change tracks
That's,
quickly.
yeah.
But his difficulty is if he changed tracks, at the behest of Danielle Smith, she seems far more powerful than what she is. So her getting out in front of that, her kind of vocalizing that position, I think is really wise. And she was the only one of all of the premiers to really do so. Doug Ford was busy trying to defend himself against one of the newly minted conservative MPs, who basically said he's a liberal light. I think that it'll be very interesting to see how any of the other premiers react. Is Blanchette going to try and stoke the fires of that separatist movement again? Absolutely. That's when he has the most power. That's when he gets the most votes. They don't vote for a federal party if they're trying to separate. So
Yeah.
definitely he's going to try and stoke that fire. But they don't have any ability to do so. I remember evaluating that way back when they actually held the referendum, and it was basically they couldn't afford to. They couldn't afford to leave, Canada's umbrella. And the difference here is that Alberta could afford to leave.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very
And,
interesting to see.
and you have to think that that's why Trump was interfering. You'd have to think that that's his game, because what other than to torment us, which he's done quite well, what would his end game be other than to try and cause a unity crisis? Because obviously he has no love for liberals or Democrats, but he knows that would cause some dissent in Canada, and I think that is an election interference. Actually, to the point of actually, you know, causing a unity crisis. I mean, that's got to be the worst kind of election interference, right? And where is CBC screaming its head off for that? That's back to that. But I do have the names for you: Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin, and then Bill Graham for just for like a weekend march.
He must have been an interim.
Yeah, he was. And then
Dion.
Stéphane Dion, that's correct. Yeah, Stéphane Dion again for 2 years, and then Michael Ignatieff. He's very much similar to Mark Carney, I think. You know, they're both intellectuals.
So similar.
Yeah. And then Bob Rae.
Oh, I forgot about Bob Rae.
And he was a former NDP, so the NDP Liberals, there you go. So Bob Rae. And then, of course, who can never forget Justin Trudeau?
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the appointment of Justin Trudeau as climate ambassador to the world. I don't know what day we're going to get that appointment. But I want to put that up on Polymarket as a bet.
No, he's going to get something, but I don't know if it'll be that.
That's the position he would love to have, so he can go and tell the rest of the world how terrible they are, and they need to follow his lead.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to chat about today? Or I know we had a long night last night, so.
No, I just think that the rest is yet to be determined. Where Pierre is going to run. There's speculation he might be going up into Alberta, or I think that most party insiders are saying that he will choose a riding that is fairly close to where he is. The reason that he is there is because he keeps his family very close to Ottawa. It's very hard on families, especially young families, to be traveling those distances. So I do think that he's definitely trying to keep his family on the east or in more of the central Canada area. So I think that's going to be very interesting to see where he chooses to go. And it's still yet to be determined who the new interim or new party leader is going to be of the NDP, and whether or not they can resurrect themselves or whether they just continue on their implosion. So there's more interesting times coming. And lots to talk about as we move forward. And I think that if anything, there is some relief in just having a leader. And this leader is going to be, instead of looking at themselves, hopefully we'll be looking outwards and trying to look at how to better Canadians' lives.
No shortage of stuff for you and I to talk about as political analysts, right? I made some jokes last night. I was a little punchy because we were a little tired and stuff like that, and that people were being really mean. But I would say that as far as political analysts go, we're as strong as anybody else out there. So
absolutely.
And there you go. With that said, we do thank you for watching Now Media, and we're going to have lots to talk about as we move through this, right? Because I think politics has become such a dinner table conversation with everybody, including the young people, which is a great place to be though too, right? So everybody's concerned, everybody's involved, and everybody's kind of in the conversation. I think that's an important thing as well.
Yeah, agreed 100%. My dad used to say the only problem with sex, religion, and politics is that we just don't talk about sex, religion, and politics.
There you go.
we need to keep it. We need to have conversations about it, normalize that, and really educate ourselves.
And we need to get to a point where we can have a difference of opinion and still have a conversation and not start screeching at each other like banshees.
Oh yeah, no.
Anyway, we do thank you.
I want to end on one thing. To all of those out there who voted, who cast your ballot, just thank you. Regardless of who you voted for, obviously, I'm just so grateful every time we as Canadians have the opportunity to put up our hand and voice who we want to lead us. And so just thank you for doing that, and thank you for being a part of this, and thank you for supporting Now Media, truly one of our independent voices that we have out there.
Yeah, and the politicians they only want to really listen to you during election times. You're going to notice how it's going to get really quiet right now. But our job here is to hold them accountable. And Renee and I will probably focus a little bit of attention now on David Eby and the healthcare stuff that's still going on here in British Columbia, because he's been hiding in the shadows now, because obviously the national election has kind of given him some cover for a while. So with that said, we'll be talking about you, Mr. Eby, next.
Have a great one.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for watching Now Media.